In the year 539 BCE, the greatest city on earth did not burn. Its walls, so massive that chariots raced along their tops, were never breached by force. Babylon, the city that had defied empires and outlasted dynasties for over 1,000 years, simply opened its gates. And the age of Babylon ended not with a roar, but with a silence so vast it still echoes. To understand what was lost that day, you have to understand what Babylon was. Not just a city, not just an empire, a place that kept coming back, that rose and fell and rose again until the ancient world could not imagine itself without it. This is the rise and fall of Babylon. Before Babylon, Mesopotamia was already ancient. The land between the Tigris and the Euphrates had given birth to the first cities humanity ever built. Writing was invented here. Law took shape here. Kingdoms rose and collapsed in cycles as old as the rivers. The Akkadians under Sargon, the third dynasty of Ur, each powerful, each eventually swept away. Babylon in those centuries was nothing, a modest settlement on the Euphrates, no monuments, no dynasty worth remembering. But Mesopotamia was a land where power shifted fast, and when it shifted toward Babylon, everything changed. Around 1894 BCE, an Amorite dynasty established itself in the city. For a century, its rulers expanded cautiously. Then, in 1792 BCE, a young king named Hammurabi took the throne, and the history of the ancient world bent toward him. He inherited a small kingdom surrounded on every side: Larsa to the south, Eshnunna to the east, Mary to the northwest, Assyria to the north. Survival alone would have been impressive. Hammurabi did not merely survive, he conquered. For the first decades, he built quietly: canals, temples, infrastructure. Then, in the 1760s BCE, he struck. Campaign after campaign, swift and decisive. Larsa fell. Eshnunna was absorbed. Mary subdued. Within a generation, the minor city on the Euphrates had become the capital of an empire. But Hammurabi understood something most conquerors never grasp. Victory holds nothing together. Order does. The Code of Hammurabi, nearly 300 laws carved into a towering stele of black diorite, was the most comprehensive legal code the world had ever seen. Trade, property, family, punishment, all governed by written principle, not the whim of kings. It was a declaration that Babylon was not merely powerful, it was civilized. Then Hammurabi died, and the cracks opened almost overnight. His successors lacked his genius. Territories broke away, and in 1595 BCE, a Hittite army swept down from Anatolia, sacked the city, and shattered the dynasty entirely. For most cities, that would have been the end. Babylon refused to disappear. What followed was not glory, it was survival, and it lasted centuries. The Kassites took control and held Babylon for over 400 years. They conquered nothing, but they maintained the city, preserved its temples, kept its traditions alive. Even when Assyria rose to dominance and Babylon became a subject kingdom, the city carried a weight no military defeat could erase. Assyrian kings who conquered Babylon restored its temples and sought its approval. To destroy Babylon was unthinkable, even to those who held it in chains. When the Assyrian king Sennacherib sacked it in 619 BCE, the horror was so great that his own son rebuilt what had been torn down. Babylon was no longer just a capital, it was an idea,
and even empires feared the cost of erasing it. Then, after centuries of subjugation, Babylon struck back. The Assyrian Empire, overstretched and fractured, began to break apart, and a Babylonian general named Nabopolassar saw what no one believed was possible. In 626 BCE, he declared independence. Allying with the Medes, he turned on Assyria with the accumulated fury of generations. In 612 BCE, Nineveh fell, the most dominant empire the ancient world had ever known, gone. And from the wreckage, Babylon rose again, not as a subject, not as a symbol, as a sovereign empire. Under Nabopolassar's son, Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon became something the world had never seen. He took the throne in 605 BCE, warrior and architect in equal measure. His army swept the Levant, crushed resistance, and in 582 BCE destroyed Jerusalem, carrying its people into exile, an act that would sear itself into the memory of an entire civilization. But it was the city itself that stunned the ancient world. Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt Babylon to overwhelm. The Ishtar Gate, golden bulls and snarling dragons against lapis blue tiles, was a statement of supremacy. The processional way stretched wide and magnificent, lined with lions in brilliant relief. The great ziggurat Etemenanki, the temple the world would remember as the Tower of Babel, rose in terraced stages towards the heavens. The hanging gardens, real or legendary, seized the ancient imagination so completely they were counted among the seven wonders. This was Babylon fully realized, a city that had survived for 1,000 years and emerged more magnificent than at any point in its history. Under Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon was not the capital of an empire, it was the capital of the world. But the cruelty of history is this: the higher the summit, the faster the fall. Nebuchadnezzar died in 562 BCE. The throne passed through weak, unstable hands. The final king, Nabonidus, alienated the priesthood, abandoned the capital, and fractured the one institution that gave Babylonian kings their legitimacy. And while Babylon consumed itself from within, something unstoppable was building in the east. Cyrus II of Persia had started as a vassal state. In barely 20 years, he had conquered the Medes, absorbed Lydia, and forged the largest empire the world had ever seen. By 539 BCE, only one prize remained. The end came with terrifying speed. At the Battle of Opis, the Babylonian army broke. Days later, Persian forces reached the walls, and then the gates of Babylon opened. No siege, no last stand. The greatest city on earth fell without a fight. Cyrus entered not as a destroyer, but as a liberator, honoring Marduk, freeing captive peoples, proclaiming himself Babylon's rightful king. And just like that, after 1,200 years of defiance and reinvention, Babylonian sovereignty was finished. What should have come next was oblivion. That is what happens to fallen empires. But Babylon was not like other empires. This was the place where law was first written in stone for all to see, where the stars were charted and the story of the Great Flood was pressed into clay 1,000 years before Genesis. This was the city where civilization looked at itself and recognized what it was becoming. The Greeks wrote of it with awe. The Hebrews carved it into the deepest layers of Scripture, the golden scepter, the emblem of worldly power brought to divine judgment. The Romans invoked its name, the writers of Revelation made it prophecy, and every empire that came after, Persian, Greek, Roman, measured itself against the standard Babylon had set. Every civilization that built great walls, codified its laws, or raised monuments toward the sky was building in Babylon's shadow, whether it knew it or not. The walls are gone now, the gates are dust, the gardens have returned to the earth. But Babylon did not end when its gates swung open. It rose, one final time, out of the world of empires and into the permanent architecture of human memory, into scripture, into legend, into the foundation of how civilization understands itself. Empires end. Babylon did not. Babylon became eternal.